Good morning, everybody. This is the news that we are waking up to for Monday, December 23rd, 2024. This is day 1034 of the full-scale invasion. Now, overnight, we saw an air raid alert. The Russian Federation sent upon the territory of Ukraine 72 drones of mixed type. Now, there's been several key changes to the language that the Air Force uses when they inform us of these drone attacks. It used to be always just so many drones of the Shahed 131, 136 type. But with the plant in Tatarstan pumping out these Shahed clones, the language has changed because they're not just pumping out Shahed clones, right? They're pumping out decoys. And 50 to 60%, it's estimated, from September through November of the drones pointed at Ukraine were just fakes, cheap plywood and foam rubber meant to exhaust air defenses. But we have also, so today, what we're hearing from the Air Force is drones of mixed types. That's what they're calling this attack, the makeup of this attack. Further, in addition to the 47 of 72 shot down, they tell us that 25 simulator drones were lost in location with 0 casualties or damage reported. And so that's 72 out of 72. That's a 100% interception rate. It's my opinion, based on these changes in language, that the Ukrainian armed forces have determined a way to tell the difference between decoys and the real thing. And I think that that is evidenced in the language that they are using. They use very specific language, these folks. They're very careful about what they say and how they say it. And to make that change, I think it has to indicate something significant. Now, we still don't know how these decoys are being taken out. They're not being shot down, right? They're being lost in location, is how it gets translated from the Ukrainian, by active countermeasures. What those countermeasures are, we do not know. And they may not simply be of one type either. The Ukrainians may have taken this opportunity to practice all kinds of different tactics on these drones that are not of any threat. Turning to international news, our boy Trump here has said, quote unquote, President Putin says he wants to meet with me as soon as possible, so we have to wait for this. But we will need to end that horrible, horrible war. Now, again, Trump's camp is telling us that he and Putin had a call the Thursday after the election. The Putin camp denies it, so clearly it must be true. He went on to say, quite erroneously, that millions of soldiers have died. We've got to stop it. It's ridiculous. That part I agree with. That war would never have happened if I was president. This, of course, is sheer nonsense. The war began 2 years before he was president. Vladimir Putin has been planning and preparing and stockpiling for the full-scale invasion for years before Donald Trump even came to office the first time. This was clearly his plan, his long game. And the existence of Trump has no impact on that. Now, according to the Financial Times and a report shared on Friday, Trump did say, again, according to this report in the Financial Times Friday, that he intends to maintain support of supplies of American weapons to Ukraine after taking office. We shall see. But let's hope so, huh? Now, this guy, Fico, first, last week, he threatened Ukraine with serious consequences, or serious conflict, rather, serious conflict. The threat of serious conflict should Ukraine cut off the gas supplies to Slovakia. This is Robert Fico, the Prime Minister of Slovakia. Now, after that threat, he made an unannounced trip to the Kremlin, where he bowed down and kissed the ass of this murderous dictator, clearly in hopes of getting his way somehow, getting his gas, which it poses a real threat to the economy of Slovakia. I'm not saying that it doesn't. Austria, Hungary, Slovakia, and Moldova have all have relied on Russian gas for the last 3 years of war. They have all known for the last 3 years that pipeline transit agreement across Ukraine to get them their gas was expiring on January 1st, 2025. They've all had 3 years to make plans. And what do we see? We see Moldova and Austria having filled to capacity their storage facilities so that they each have at least 3 months worth of gas on hand. We have seen them both explore alternate modalities for transportation of gas into their respective countries. What we have not seen from either Hungary or Slovakia, the two countries that kiss Putin's ass on a regular basis, is any acknowledgement that this deadline was coming or any competent resolution to it. They have completely failed. They had 3 years to keep putting money in the pocket of this guy so that this guy could keep killing Ukrainians. And they did nothing. Nothing. That's willful ignorance and sheer incompetence on the part of these governments. And now they want to blame Ukraine that they are not ready to face what they knew what was coming. And they're going to kiss the ass of this murderous dictator rather than do what's right. It's obscene. Now, further, in international news, we do not want to take our eyes off Georgia. Georgia continues its protests. We are now in day 26. This is video from last night, day 25 of the protests. And you can see the streets are still full of protesters facing off against the police. The police are out in force, but the level of violence seems to have diminished. Now, whether or not that's related to the U.S. sanctioning of diplomats and people in the government who have been supporting the hard crackdown on these protesters is unclear. Additional sanctions are coming against these folks, and we will keep our eye on Georgia. It's an important domino to watch. Now, let me play this video for you. This is, in terms of Russia on fire. So these next few segments are all Russia on fire. Now, dig it. We'll start with this one on the left. There's two here. Take a look. This guy is in a parking lot right outside the Azure Skies luxury apartment complex when he sees this drone coming in and he gets it on film. Now, do you notice the sharp curve that the drone makes as it flies into its target there? I want to point something out, and we can see it better in this second video here. Now look. Do you see this? This building has already been hit. This is the second drone. And watch where it hits. Whoops, sorry. 1 floor below where the first one hit. Now, look. The Russians are saying that these just happened to go into these luxury apartment buildings. 3 drones. 2 into Azure Skies, 1 into the Manhattan apartment complex. These 2 apartment complexes are some of the wealthiest real estate in the bustling city of Kazan, Russia. We do not know who was in there, and the Russians are reporting no casualties from these strikes. But you can see clearly that second drone hits in almost the exact same spot as the first one. If what the Russians are telling us was true, that the drones had been sent off course by electronic warfare, they were never intended to hit these apartment complexes. How is it possible that two of them impacted virtually within the same 10 feet, 3 meters? In my mind, it's not a possibility. Here's why. Because I understand how GPS spoofing works, right? What you do is you convince the target that they are 3 meters to their left. Not a big change, right? You're just 3 meters to your left, right? About 10 feet to the left of where you think you are. Okay. Now, as that drone travels over distance, that 3 meters becomes an increasingly wide divergence from its original target path. If these drones had been spoofed by electronic warfare into going off target, now legitimately there are other ways to do this, but the most common is spoofing. That's the most common methodology, as I understand it. If these drones had been confused by electronic warfare, there's no way that confusion would have led them to the same spot. It would require either you taking over control of the drone and flying them, or if in fact they were spoofed, you would have had to take control of the drones and convince them of their mistake at different points in the sky, but convince them that they were off by a factor that led them to different factors that led them to the same destination. It's highly, highly improbable to the best of my knowledge. Not to say that there isn't a solution out there that would make it happen, but I think that it's far more likely that, as we have heard, high-ranking government officials and security officials have been hiding official activity inside of apartment complexes. So even though this is a residential apartment building, there's no way that we don't know that it's been converted to an FSB office, for example, or it's been converted to a GRU office. And I think probably something like that is what's going on. That either this was the apartment of a very high-ranking official or military person who the Ukrainians believed was home at the time, or it was being used for other purposes and it was a legitimate target based on intelligence. Now, again, we have no reports of casualties from the Russians. That doesn't mean that there aren't any. And we have the Russians insisting that this was a residential complex. What makes me think that it was something else? Putin is furious. And in a very impassioned speech yesterday, he vowed destruction on Ukraine, to bring more destruction to Ukraine. This is in the Republic of Tatarstan. So I want to say it's 1,200 kilometers, or about 800 miles from the closest Ukrainian border point. And this is actually it. This is sort of an unrelated story. There you can see the city of Kazan. And just next to it there is the special economic zone where the drone factory that makes the Shahed clones is located in the Republic of Tatarstan. And you can see, just like Kazan, it's about 1,400 kilometers, about 850 miles. It is being reported that in addition to the drone strikes on Kazan City, there was a drone strike at the warehouse of the drone factory, where $16 million worth of drone parts, or about 400 of these Shahed attack drones, it's estimated by the Ukrainian GUR, was located and has been destroyed. And so Russia is on fire, both in Kazan City and at the drone factory warehouse in Tatarstan, in nearby Tatarstan. Now, we're getting different reports on this. Let's all listen to this for a second. Hear the snap, crackle, pop? We get a lot of snap, crackle, pop, like small arms ammunition going off, but no missile contrails coming out of there. So I say we're getting different reports on this because the Kyiv Post identified this as an attack on a petroleum refinery in Novocherkassk, Rostov region, just across the border from Ukraine. But other folks are identifying this as an ammunition depot, and based on the snap, crackle, pop, one would tend to think that it's an ammunition depot. It's not to say that the Russians didn't store some ammunition by an oil refinery. They might have, but we just don't know that to be true. Anyway, Russia's on fire. And boy, is Russia on fire. Let me play this for you. This is a post office. I'm not sure if it's in Moscow or St. Petersburg. But if you look in there, somebody has thrown a bunch of fireworks in there is what it looks like. You've like snap, crackle, pop again, only this time inside the post office. This guy's going in. So you know the place isn't on fire, right? It's fireworks going off inside. But these kinds of attacks, there have been a double dozen of them in the Moscow and St. Petersburg regions ever since Thursday's town hall with Putin. Here's another one. Take a look at this. This guy knows how to make a Molotov cocktail. And he's at a recruiting office. And he just keeps lighting them up, baby. In the full video, I think it's like 7. I think he throws like 7 at the building. But this guy knew what he was doing. This woman does not. Now take a look here. She has already spewed something over these bank machines inside of a bank in Moscow. Then she lights a match. And unfortunately, she used gasoline. You can see the way that it explodes as soon as the match gets near it. And I cannot imagine what became of her. The video does not show us, thank God. When you're doing this kind of thing, you got to use a slow-burning fuel like kerosene or diesel. Gasoline is explosive. And so you want to avoid that. But like I said, double dozen of these kinds of attacks around Moscow and St. Petersburg. Now, who's behind it? Well, the Russian authorities say that scammers are phoning up Russians and offering them sums of money to perform these acts of sabotage. And they are finding willing participants. But apparently they are not giving them any training. Now, look, I don't know that that's true. That's what Russia is saying. It's probably just as likely that the Russian people have finally had enough. Time will tell. Now, this is some of the most fascinating shit yet. We know, or rather we believe, based on intelligence from South Korea, based on intelligence from the US, based on Ukrainian intelligence, that the North Korean soldiery had been issued fake documents identifying them as from the Russian region of Tuva, giving them Russian names and Russian patronymics. But these Russian IDs taken from fallen North Korean soldiers show all those hallmarks. What they do not show is the official Ministry of Defense stamp on these documents, right? Like a notary republic stamp. And no pictures. There's no photographs, right? Like that should be the glaring thing here, is that there are no photographs of what kind of ID doesn't have your photograph. There's a place for it. Why isn't it there? Why isn't the official stamp there? Now this guy over here on the right, he signed his name in Russian, right? That's clearly Russian. These other two guys, they signed their names in Korean. That does throw a monkey wrench in the works, doesn't it, boys? On your cover story, I'll tell you, execution at the level we have come to expect. Now, the press release from the Kursk military command stated that based on decrypted data, the real names of these three soldiers were Ban Guk Jin, Lee Dae Hut, and Cho Choi Ho. Now, they do not explain what decrypted data. We don't know if that means these guys all had cell phones on them, and on the cell phones they found their real names. We don't know if that means that the database that tracks the phony name to the North Korean name has been compromised by the Ukrainians. They might have the whole fucking database for all we know. They're doing cyber attacks against the Russians all the time, stealing servers, burning down infrastructure. It's entirely possible they've got the database. It's also entirely possible that it was just done from the cell phones that these guys had on them. We don't know. But the Ukrainians seem to believe that they have some source files that identify the real names of these people, and they have deciphered them. Now, let me play this for you. This is in the Tyumen region of Russia. And it's a couple days old now, by the time it got smuggled out of Russia to the rest of us. So at the time that this was shot, what we're going to see here was about 2,000 miles away. And this is, whoops, sorry about that. Can I not pause this? Let's see here. This was about 2,000 miles away from Ukraine, but on its way to Ukraine. And this is what's there's two things here of particular interest. These self-propelled howitzers. These are Koksans. These are North Korean-made howitzers from the 80s. They fire 170 millimeter shell. They have a slow firing rate, probably the slowest of all self-propelled guns that we've seen in this conflict. And they fire a proprietary round that the Russians don't use. We know the Russians got 3 of these, back a couple months ago, and now there's 11 more en route to Ukraine. Now, 14 artillery pieces in a conflict where the Russians can lose 34 artillery pieces a day is not going to make any difference. The fact that they are slow, inaccurate, and that where are they going to get the munitions for them, except from the North Koreans? Only what they send is what you're getting, I think. Unless they've built a plant dedicated to 170 millimeter shells, which I doubt, these are on their way to Ukraine. And by now, right, they were about 2,000 miles away. What is that? That's roughly 3,000 kilometers away when this video was taken 48 hours ago. They could well be close to coming into the Krasnodar train terminal, which is the terminal end of the Trans-Siberian Railway where all the North Korean weapons get unloaded, to the best of our knowledge. Now, there's more to this video. Take a look at this. I already gave away the ending by advancing the slide by mistake, but look here. Right? You see the guns go by. You can count them. There's 11 of them. And then there's these. These babies here. Look at this. What do you think that is? Giant dildos for Putin? Nope. It's the Puk-Guk Song, intermediate range ballistic missile. We believe they certainly resemble that, though they're tinted, they're covered, right? They have the profile of this intermediate range ballistic missile that North Korea has. And to me, the fact that Putin is getting intermediate range ballistic missiles from North Korea says to me that the Oreshnik is a load of shit. If he had a bunch of his own intermediate range ballistic missiles, which is what the Oreshnik is, if he had them, he would just use them. He does not have them. They cannot solve the payload problem. As I understand it, the warheads, there's 36 independent re-entry vehicles inside of an Oreshnik warhead. The warhead itself can only hold 800 pounds of explosives. That means 800 kilograms, 800 kilograms of explosives. That means 22 kilograms per re-entry vehicle. One Sea Baby drone can carry a ton of explosives. You're talking about 22 kilograms, about 44 pounds? That means that each re-entry vehicle, okay, so yeah, you have something that goes at Mach 11. It costs you $120 million to put it out, right? One, because it's meant for nuclear devices. It's not meant to carry TNT. So at most, you can get about 40, let's call it 50. Let's give them the benefit of a doubt. Call it 50 pounds, about 25 kilos per re-entry vehicle. Now, nobody wants to see any Ukrainian city come under fire of 36 independent multiple re-entry vehicles, each carrying 50 pounds of TNT. Nobody wants that. But if my math is right, and I could be wrong, I'm way outside my area of expertise here, but just based on what I understand about this thing, if that math is right, the Oreshnik offers virtually no threat, even loaded with explosives. I mean, where the bombs come down, it's going to be a mess. And people are likely to die. But turn Kyiv to dust? Nah. You're going to have to load that baby up with some plutonium, baby. And you seem to be unwilling to do that. You are making the Oreshnik the new boogeyman, and you've stopped talking about nuclear strikes. Maybe because the Kremlin has finally realized the West does not give a shit. Please, bring it on, motherfuckers. We've had enough of this nonsense of yours. All right, that's it for me for Monday, December the 23rd, 2024, day 1034 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. I'm Peter Alexievich. Thank you so much for joining me.